firearms, but police do not want them there. They said today, the St. Louis County Police Chief said they are unnecessary and inflammatory. Others have said that their presence is like throwing gasoline on a fire. But the protests up to this point have been fairly organized. This one is not. It is, as you see, fairly chaotic. I'm going to talk to this gentleman here, Greg. Greg, come in. Quick question for you. Are these protests working? Many of the governor's critics have used that old line, what did the governor know and when did he know it? And they're expecting upwards of 10,000 people, maybe more here to fill up this street. You see some of the construction work going on. And get this, the park doesn't even open for business till 2 p.m. for this event, but already we got fans lined up. In the next few hours, the governor of Illinois, Bruce Rauner, will be here to tour the damage. And when he does get here, he'll see sights like that, a half-destroyed grain silo, and over here, the other half, where it landed. Jonathan, right now, crews are putting sandbags down on Interstate 55, heading south out of St. Louis. And that's a big deal because Interstate 44, where we are right now, west of St. Louis, is also partially closed. Tony, protesters are still, right now, blocking the entrances to several stores down here, just as they promised to hit Chicago in its wallet. It started with a march up Chicago's magnificent mile of shopping. Police put up no resistance as hundreds of demonstrators blocked both lanes of what would normally be a very busy Michigan Avenue. They let their frustrations ring out over the killing of 17-year-old Laquan McDonald, shot 16 times by a white police officer, Jason Van Dyke. He's now been charged with first-degree murder.
We protest every time police murder us. It's going to keep happening until the black community controls the police.
Mass marches on the Mag Mile are nothing new. They are often like choreographed dances between demonstrators and police. But after the marching stopped came this new tactic.
And we're here to break their back.
The demonstrators literally blocked the doors of every high-end shop they could find.
Not one time.
Neiman Marcus, Macy's, the Apple Store, and police didn't stop them. One officer told us that Mayor Rahm Emanuel ordered police not to lay a hand on protesters as long as they remained nonviolent. The Reverend Jesse Jackson was all for it.
Economic withdrawal is a method, so long as we're disciplined and nonviolent. The effective use of our dollars, marching fees, and our votes all matter.
Shoppers who managed to get into the stores either went on with their shopping or gawked from the windows. Outside, many shoppers treated the protests like a tourist attraction, and they weren't all in agreement on the effectiveness of the protest.
We think it's great. We think it's great. We're here for the holiday, but we're happy that our kids have the opportunity to see this.
They have a right to do this. I'm not in agreement with trying to close down shopping on the Miracle Mile. I mean, this is what pays for the city.
Shut it down!
All week long, we've heard younger demonstrators accusing older black community leaders of being too cozy with Chicago's city administration. Chicago's black city council members have all called for big changes in the police department, but that didn't stop this protester from demanding they get the boot.
They don't work in our favor anyway.
Jesse Jackson denied that protesters are divided.
This is a supremely integrated march age-wise. But that's irrelevant. The point is not our ages. The point is people being killed without accountability.
We won't know for a while what kind of dent the protests put in Chicago's Black Friday economy or what kind of changes it might eventually bring to Chicago's police department. But Jesse Jackson called it a victory.
This has been a successful day. It's cold and raining. People are here based upon determination.
Randall, that video comes from a surveillance camera near the scene of the shooting, and it shows what appears to be 18-year-old Tyrone Harris pulling what looks like a gun out of his waistband, but it does not show him allegedly shooting at officers nor them shooting him. He was ultimately badly wounded. He's still in critical condition tonight, but this surveillance video will certainly be used against him. He's facing 10 charges involving assault. Randall?
Now, what are protesters saying about the video, and in fact, what are protesters doing tonight?
Well, right now, Randall, they're gathering, as always, fifth night in a row, about 2 miles from here, where they have been gathering and get everyone together. And we stopped out there a few minutes ago and talked to a guy named Drummer Boy. That's what he calls himself. And him and his friends are out there pounding on the drums out there. They're getting the crowd juiced for tonight's protest, as they always do. But I asked them, with all the effort that you're doing to affect change for the Ferguson Police Department towards you, how will you know if you've accomplished your goal?
I can tell you how I would know. Nobody would be out here.
David, the state won't say exactly why it's going after these prisoners for their room and board, but the critics say the real reason is insidious.
I'm going to be here all day.
Melvin Moore is just now learning how to use a smartphone and a computer since getting out of prison last fall. He served 20 years for murder and armed robbery. While sitting in prison, he was thrilled to learn that his grandmother was going to leave him a small inheritance. But before Moore even found out how much he was getting, before he saw a dime of it, before he got out, the Illinois Department of Corrections learned about the inheritance and told the state attorney general, Lisa Madigan, about it.
It's crazy.
She then sued Moore for his room and board in prison, $338,000.
It was a shock to me when I first saw it. Then, when I started thinking about it, I was upset about it because I didn't understand it, and I still don't understand it.
The Attorney General's office is relying on a 1982 law that allows the state to sue to recover money for room and board. It's a law the state is using more and more in recent years, as are other states. Brian Nelson of the Uptown People's Law Center focuses on prisoners' rights, and he says an inmate is basically helpless.
There's a rule that you have to disclose assets to the Department of Corrections. And if you're an inmate and a prisoner or a convict and you don't disclose this, they can write you a disciplinary report and put you in segregation for 6 months because you didn't tell them where your money was so they could take it from you.
Moore's inheritance turned out to be nearly $14,000. The law allowed him to keep $4,000, so the state just took what was left.
I felt like they was rushing to take it because they told me you can't have an attorney unless I probably would have paid for one, which I ain't had the money to do.
Illinois Attorney General Lisa Madigan admitted to us in a statement that the law may indeed raise roadblocks to former inmates trying to lead successful lives, and the law raises moral questions that legislators need to address. The Department of Corrections told us, in a statement, that it decides who to sue on a case-by-case basis, and that a wide variety of factors are considered. In most cases, the amount of money recovered from inmates is a drop in the bucket for the Department of Corrections' $1.5 billion budget. And in some cases, critics say, the state is retaliating against inmates who win lawsuits over inhumane treatment by turning around and suing them for their room and board. And Nelson says there are plenty of reasons for an inmate to sue.
Illinois' prison system is right now the worst in the country. We are worse than California.
In what way?
Mental health treatment, medical treatment, overcrowding.
Beyond that, one criminal justice expert says the law simply doesn't make sense.
If you want to make sure that people commit more crimes, wind up back in prison, cost taxpayers more money, a great way to do it is to take away everything that they have.
Melvin Moore says as tough as things are for him right now, he can't help but think of the grandmother who left him that inheritance.
She wouldn't give it to me if she knew they would take it. So it was basically for me to be able to come home and be able to try some kind of way fit in, because I don't fit in. Even though the Attorney General is now saying that maybe the state legislature should take another look at this law, neither she nor the Department of Corrections is showing any indication that they're going to call off their dogs. David?
And Andy, has the state legislature said anything about this? And also, what about the governor?
Well, nothing from the state legislature. It's kind of on the back burner for them right now. They've got so much on their plate. But the governor could theoretically step in and tell the Attorney General not to file these lawsuits anymore. But when we asked the governor's office about it, they said no comments.
And you mentioned that the Department of Corrections does this on a case-by-case basis. Is there any one particular factor that they look at in terms of trying to decide who to go after?
Well, what's interesting is they said that in a way of defending themselves, they said, we really only file these lawsuits against lifers, guys who will be in prison for the rest of their life, so they really won't need the money when they get out because they'll never get out. But critics obviously say that still disencourages them from filing a lawsuit for inhumane treatment, for example. And if they did win the money, they could always give it, I suppose, to relatives or friends. David? It is, Jonathan. The southbound lanes of Interstate 55 are still closed right now. This is the major thoroughfare south out of St. Louis, and crews are just trying to get the Merrimack River off their road. Now, the Merrimack has at least started receding and left in its wake irritation, frustration, devastation. This man told his rescuers that he and his dog spent last night on their roof. And whoever lived under this roof now has no roof at all. Adam Jones and his wife realize they are very lucky. Home sweet home for the couple and their daughter, and another 3-year-old relative is a very cramped hotel room. He never bought flood insurance because he was told he didn't need it.
My neighbor, he told me in '93 that it just barely had came up to his house, so I figured we're up, elevated a little bit, we should be fine. I mean, what's the odds of it happening again, right?
The surging Merrimack River has chased hundreds of people in the area just west of St. Louis from their homes and into hotels.
Very cramped. I mean, obviously, you know, you're used to a whole house by yourself, and now you come to this room. I mean, it's very hectic trying to get in and out of here with all this traffic being diverted.
The Merrimack has been receding in some places and rising in others. The McDonald's restaurant we saw partially submerged Wednesday has now disappeared. Daylight reveals areas where floodwaters might not start to recede for another 24 hours, and travel around St. Louis is a nightmare. At least 40 roads and 2 interstates are partially shut down. Authorities tried throwing industrial-sized sandbags onto I-55 to hold off the Merrimack south of the city, but the effort failed, and they didn't even bother on I-44 west of the city, which is still swamped.
It took us probably 4 hours to go 40 miles.
James Hill had the misfortune of getting stuck on I-55 just as the water started coming up.
It was dreadful. It was tiring.
But both James and Adam know they at least have their own beds.
I just feel bad for the people. Like, I God bless everybody that lost their home, you know.
While plenty of others are still wondering how they'll ever be able to put their lives back together. The Merrimack crested at 47 feet today. That's about 23 feet above flood stage. And next up, the Mississippi River, possibly reaching record levels over the next couple of days. Jonathan?